Welcome to the Detroit Lions Morning Rounds podcast. I'm Jimmy Liao, University of Michigan Medical School graduate, lifelong Lions fan, talking about COVID, the NFL, the Lions, and other medical issues. Breaking news just now. This is Saturday morning. Chiefs-Patriots game scheduled to play tomorrow has been postponed to Monday or Tuesday, likely Tuesday, according to reports. Cam Newton was tested positive today. Chiefs practice squad quarterback Jordan Ta'amu also was positive. So because they're having to redo a bunch of testing for players today, which is a travel day, they had to postpone the travel time, postpone the playing trip till at least tomorrow, which is why the game is getting postponed. Now, here's my concern for the NFL. If games are going to get postponed due to one or two guys testing positive, then this puts the rest of the season in doubt. It puts the season in disarray. Delaying the game by 1 or 2 days does help identify players who may convert from negative to positive tests over the next couple days. However, there's no way to catch all of the players that might convert. The incubation period for COVID is thought to be 2 to 14 days, but that's not set in stone. Most players will probably convert within a week, but not for sure. There could be a long tail of players converting to positive tests. You can't wait till all the players are cleared of COVID. You can't wait until a full incubation period is completely passed through, which could be 2 to 3 weeks. Otherwise, that'll completely disrupt the season. So the NFL needs to figure out their philosophy here as far as dealing with positive tests. One option is to go ahead and just play games as scheduled. Players that test positive clearly are going to be out for the game, but any player that's testing negative, you might want to just go ahead and let them play and see how things go over the season. Yes, that does increase the likelihood of outbreaks. It increases the likelihood of infecting others. However, playing football is a risk period. So at some point, you need to figure out what level of risk are you willing to accept. If you're not willing to accept any risk, you can't play football. If you're willing to accept a moderate risk, then maybe you can play each game on schedule and just see how things go. Again, the risk for players of severe symptoms related to COVID is very low. These are young, healthy, elite athletes. The likelihood of severe symptoms is far less than 1%. So it might be the way to go simply to have the players do the best they can, quarantine themselves away from the facility. They're already fairly safe as far as distancing in the facility. Maybe the NFL just needs to just plow forward, but the country has to be okay with that as well. We need to not criticize the NFL too much if they just go forward and have occasional positive tests, occasional mini outbreaks along the way. The Titans-Steelers game was postponed till week 7 of the season. So the NFL gave the Titans full 2 weeks off. As of now, Saturday morning, there have been a total of 16 positive tests in the Titans facility, 8 players and 8 staff. That's not a whole lot. Players, there's maybe 69 or so players, probably a little bit more if you count IR players. Staff is probably around double of that. So 200 or so, maybe 300 people who are regularly being tested, 16 of them positive. That's not a huge amount, although false negatives are certainly a consideration. There could be 20, 30 false negatives out there who are actually have COVID. The whole testing of the Titans with this 1 or 2 additional players every day testing positive, this does provide an interesting case study for the conversion rate over an outbreak. It'll be interesting to follow this to see if the conversion from negative to positive decreases over the next few days as we get further and further along into this incubation period. Other COVID news, Adrian Peterson revealed that he did test antibody positive for COVID earlier this year. And he had some COVID-like symptoms back in March. So he's suspecting that that was COVID. Now, it's hard to know what to make of antibody tests, which I understand is frustrating to everybody. Tests aren't perfect. The antibody test certainly is not perfect. There are potentially high false positives and false negatives with the test. We really don't know what to make of antibody tests at this point. Let's review how the antibody test works. It takes the body 1 to 3 weeks to produce COVID antibodies. In many people, the antibody decreases fairly rapidly. So 3 or 4 weeks after you got COVID, potentially you could test negative for antibodies. Some people may never even produce measurable antibodies. So you could be testing COVID antibody negative throughout the entire 1 to 3 week time period, even if you had COVID. False negative tests are possible, which means you could have the antibodies, but the test doesn't detect them. So the bottom line is there could be a very high false negative rate for antibodies. Now, there's also a potentially high false positive rate because you could have antibodies to a different virus that the test falsely picks up as COVID antibodies. Antibody tests are not something we routinely or have regularly done over the years with cold viruses or coronaviruses. So we don't have a great understanding of what to make of these tests, and we don't have a gold standard test that is absolutely extremely reliable and accurate with a very low false negative positive rate. So it's good news that Adrian Peterson did test antibody positive. And if you test antibody positive for COVID, that's a good thing. However, you can't assume you have immunity to COVID, and you can't even assume that you actually had COVID. But it is better to test antibody positive than antibody negative. Other news and notes, J.C. Tretter, the NFLPA player president, says he wants grass fields everywhere to help lower injury risk. Anything that decreases player speed will improve player safety. So grass fields do slow down players. So I think it probably would be a good idea if they could put in grass fields everywhere because it just slows down players. Another thing that just helps with player safety is effective steroid testing because that decreases player speed, decreases player size. Anything that can do that will improve player safety because force equals mass times acceleration. If you can decrease the force, it improves player safety. So decreasing player mass or decreasing their acceleration ability will improve player safety. Now let's talk about Game 4 for the Lions injury reports. Big time injury report for the Saints, which is good news for the Lions. Michael Thomas, which was the main guy we've been watching out for, he is going to be out. Jared Cook, Andres Pete, Marcus Davenport, who the Saints gave up 2 first-round picks for, Marshawn Lattimore, starting cornerback, and Janoris Jenkins, cornerback, are all out for the Saints. So from an injury standpoint, those are big hits to the Saints. For the Lions, the injury report is looking really positive. Desmond Trufant looks like he's playing this week. The team is looking really healthy. The main guys that are missing are Justin Coleman, who's on IR, so he has to miss this week. Probably will be missing many more weeks. Joe Dahl is also on IR. He's out. So we got Halapula Vati Vaitai playing right guard with Tyler Crosby playing right tackle. Crosby's been looking great at offensive tackle, so that's good news. Vaitai looked pretty shaky in his first stint at guard last week. Hopefully that's just a case of getting used to the position or recovering from injury. So the Lions overall are looking very healthy and looking very good. The good news for both teams is no positive COVID cases. So it looks like unless something shows up today, the game will proceed as scheduled tomorrow. I believe they are still not testing on game days, although they might change that to check POC rapid tests on game days. Not sure about that yet at this point. So that's the update as far as today, Saturday. I'm Jimmy Liao. Feel free to leave comments, questions, disagreements, thoughtful debates on my YouTube comments or Twitter at Jimmy Liao MD. Thank you.